You see massive accumulation of gold and silver off the exchanges taking possession. So let's put all of this together, right? So what does it all mean when put together? And let's think about the Great Reset. How do you get a Great Reset? Well, first, you blow up asset prices to all-time highs at the lowest interest rates in human history. And then you incentivize the world to find a backdoor because you watch what just happened to the Russians, who 85% of the world is saying, well, you're still okay to trade with because they don't like the way the West has handled things. So they're all coalescing in this nation, 147 countries on the Belt Road. All of these countries in the BRICS nations, which amount to 90% of human population, all of this together. And think of the fallacy of composition. All of these countries, one by one, can't stand up to the U.S. You put them all together and they will dominate the U.S. So how does it all blow up? Why do you own gold and silver? Why? Remember, gold was classified the only tier one asset in the world next to U.S. dollars. Remember, the biggest money in the world, the central banks, the commercial banks, the sovereign wealth funds, the family offices, they're all buying it. They're all taking it off the exchanges, removing counterparty risk. You can see the drawdown from all of the major exchanges. How does this all blow up? Simple. Saudi Arabia joins the BRICS nations, and Saudi Arabia says, hey, U.S., thank you. It's been a hell of a ride. We appreciate it. As you know, we are being now protected by China and Russia. In fact, we struck a joint military cooperation agreement the day he pulled out of Afghanistan. You know what? It's in our best interest, and all of OPEC, who is on the Belt Road, that we're going to open up energy purchases in other currencies, including the yuan, the rupee, the ruble, maybe euro, gold, and dollars. Like that, it's over.
There's massive accumulation of gold and silver outside major exchanges as powerful financial entities, central banks, sovereign funds, and large investors take physical possession to eliminate counterparty risk. Schectman connects this movement to the Great Reset, where asset prices are inflated to record highs through historically low interest rates, setting up an inevitable collapse. The BRICS and Belt and Road nations, representing nearly 90% of the world's population, are uniting economically and politically, challenging U.S. dominance. A key trigger point is Saudi Arabia joining BRICS and allowing oil to be traded in multiple currencies, yuan, ruble, rupee, gold, etc., effectively ending the petrodollar system established in 1974. Once oil is no longer priced exclusively in dollars, global dollar demand collapses, causing countries to dump U.S. treasuries, leading to dollar devaluation, hyperinflation in the U.S., rising interest rates to fight inflation, collapse of U.S. asset markets, stocks, bonds, real estate, and the dollar itself. This chain reaction marks the Great Reset, exposing the fragility of the Western financial system and reinforcing the need to hold precious metals as protection, not speculation. Meanwhile, a new commodity-backed monetary system is emerging through BRICS, possibly anchored by a digital yuan and other currencies tied to tangible assets, gold, energy, and resources. Russia's Sergei Glaziev proposes that the future global reserve system will be based on a basket of local currencies and real commodities, not on a single fiat currency. The digital yuan could serve as the distributed ledger foundation for this new order, ensuring transparency and value integrity across participating nations. Schectman concludes that this global shift, where commodities back currencies, signals the mathematical inevitability of the dollar's decline and the rise of a BRICS-led financial system. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for more videos like this.
Because what happens? Every country on the planet who has had to own dollars since 1974 dumps them, because everyone will start dumping dollars. As the dollar collapses, that's pillar number one. The dollar value collapses. What happens when those dollars collapse and hit the U.S. shores? Hyperinflation. What happens as an adverse reaction of hyperinflation? Interest rates spike. You have to have higher interest rates to compensate for the loss of purchasing power. When everyone dumps dollars and Saudi Arabia and OPEC say, thanks for the memories, folks, and everyone dumps dollars and interest rates spike, stocks, bonds, real estate at the same time collapse along with the dollar. The four pillars of wealth in this country, stocks, bonds, dollars, and real estate, will all collapse as interest rates spike and as the dollar is globally dumped. And this is your great reset. This is how fragile the system truly is. And this is why you own precious metals. It is not to get rich, it's because we are on the cusp, I believe, of a change. Now, one last piece that I'd like to add to it. 75% of human population understanding on the Belt Road this new digital yuan. Well, what is the digital yuan? To me, it is a beta test. Just the other day, there was an article that came out by a man named Sergei Glazyev, and he is the Russian minister in charge of integration and macroeconomics for the Eurasian Economic Union. And he came out and he laid the fundamental principles by which the new U.S. post-dollar economic system will be based. And he goes on and says, and I quote, that it will not be based upon any particular currency as with the Bretton Woods order, but rather a market basket of local currencies tied more deeply to an array of real commodities such as gold, other precious metals, grain, hydrocarbons, sugar, etc. So think about the Chinese digital yuan. What better way to roll out a distributed ledger technology where you can show the world the veracity of everything that all of these countries have pegged? Why does the European Union not work? In theory, because there's nothing pegged to it. And each country is moving in different directions. But how about all of these countries coalescing not only against the universal dislike of the Western hegemony, so much so that we're seeing relationships being mended between Iraq and Iran, where they're building a railway between Iran and Saudi Arabia. They're mending fences between countries who have hated each other for years. But you know the old statement, my enemy's enemy is my friend. They are all coalescing against a central theme. But that's not enough. We need to peg something. What are all the countries that own all the commodities? The BRICS. And all of the countries that are joining the BRICS own all the commodities. So what better way to roll out distributed ledger technology, but to show the pegging of all of the commodities pledged to the new BRICS currency, which they just announced is coming out? Why is gold tier one? You tell me. Did they know that this was going to happen? The inevitability and the mathematics of the dollar's demise? Is it going to be the central peg to a new world reserve currency? What better way to show the immutability and the veracity of this pegging, but on a distributed ledger, Chinese digital yuan, which I believe will be the rails to a new system, the rails to the new BRICS system, to the BRICS currency. And when that happens, God help us in this country. The reclassification of gold tier one is huge. You know, just to touch on that for 1 second, everyone in my industry always thought that if anything ever rose to the level of dollar prominence, it would be something like a special drawing rights from the IMF. Maybe it makes a little more sense why the central banks are accumulating and taking possession of the gold because of its riskless elevated tier one status. So anyways, the dollar was backed by gold as far as governments were concerned. We promise that any of the gold that we're holding for you, you can exchange your dollars, or even just the dollars that you own. You can exchange them for gold at a fixed rate of $35 whenever you want. Towards the end of the Vietnam War, President de Gaulle from France realized that we were issuing more dollars and treasuries to fund the war than we had gold backing these promises. So he sent warships filled with dollars to New York Harbor and said to, President Nixon, we want our gold back for these dollars. And we gave it to him. And he bled down a very large portion of the gold held at the U.S. Treasury. And at that moment, Nixon said, okay, August of 1971, that's it. The window's closed temporarily, although it's never opened back up. But we went back on our promise to the world. And it was at that moment that the dollar was backed by nothing. And so the question that I ask the people out there, and it's amazing how few people know the answer to this question, is what has made the dollar the world reserve currency ever since? And you get a myriad of answers, usually centered around our military, or we have the biggest and most robust economy, or whatever. And I guess you could argue some of that is true. But what has made the dollar the world reserve currency was that 3 years later, Henry Kissinger was dispatched to Saudi Arabia. And he made a promise to the Saudis. He said, how about this? We will back you. Well, let's call it a joint military cooperation agreement. And we will stand behind you. We'll provide you munitions and support. No one will ever mess with the Saudi kingdom. But for that, OPEC is going to value oil in dollars globally. Okay, they said, fine. And so since 1974, every single country on the planet has had to own, virtually every country has had to own dollars in order to buy oil. And it has created this synthetic demand for the dollar called the petrodollar and made the dollar the world reserve currency. If you want to power your country, you must own dollars. It is the protection of the Saudi kingdom, and by default, the relationship with OPEC that has enabled the dollar to be the world reserve since 1974, because 3 years prior, the link to gold was severed. The dollar was at that point fiat, backed by nothing. And obviously, we all know the history. Since that point, the dollar's lost over 90% of its value.
Gold has been reclassified as a Tier 1 asset, making it highly valuable and risk-free, which explains why central banks are actively accumulating and taking physical possession. Historically, the US dollar was backed by gold, with a fixed rate of $35 per ounce, allowing holders to exchange dollars for gold. During the Vietnam War, France's President de Gaulle demanded gold in exchange for dollars, which depleted a large portion of US gold reserves. In August 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window, ending the direct dollar-gold convertibility, effectively making the dollar a fiat currency backed by nothing. The dollar became the world reserve currency not purely because of U.S. economic or military power, but due to a 1973 agreement between the U.S. via Henry Kissinger and Saudi Arabia. Under this deal, the U.S. promised military protection to Saudi Arabia, and in return, OPEC agreed to price oil in U.S. dollars, creating global demand for dollars. This system, known as the petrodollar system, has forced nearly every country to hold dollars in order to buy oil, securing the dollar's status as the world reserve currency since 1974. The link between gold and the dollar was severed 3 years before this deal, meaning the dollar has been fiat-backed since 1971, with its dominance maintained through the petrodollar. Thank you for watching.